Hey everyone, welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving into something absolutely fascinating, the psychology behind how our everyday knee-jerk reactions are literally building our children's future internal world. You know, right now, probably without even realizing it, you're using a specific parenting style. And let's be real, you didn't just pick it off a menu. Most of us just kind of absorbed it from how we were raised, or it's simply what happens automatically when we're running on fumes. But that background programming, it is actively shaping who your child is going to become.
So what actually shapes them? You might think it's the major holidays, those meticulously planned Disney trips, or even the really big punishments that define their upbringing. But the reality of what truly molds a child is completely hidden in plain sight. It is absolutely not about those grand, sweeping gestures.
The reality is actually about 1,000 repeated, incredibly ordinary moments. Things like whether you look up from your phone when they start talking, or how you react to a simple glass of spilled milk. Those moments matter so much more than the isolated big events, because these tiny interactions, repeated thousands of times, literally become the architecture of who they are.
I love this quote because it hits the nail on the head. Your natural, automatic responses dictate whether their lifelong internal voice is going to be kind, harshly critical, or just completely full of self-doubt. Think about it. The very first mirror a child ever looks into is you. When you're warm, that inner voice becomes kind. When you're harsh, it becomes a critic.
Psychologists have actually spent decades studying this exact phenomenon, and it turns out almost all of us naturally fall into one of 5 distinct styles. And guys, the difference between these 5 is literally the difference between a child who completely thrives and a child who spends years of their adult life trying to undo what their childhood built.
All right, let's jump right in. Section 1, the extremes. We're looking at control versus endless freedom.
Sitting at the absolute far edge of our spectrum is the authoritarian parent. This is a home run on strict control. Questions? They're usually viewed as defiance. Discipline is firm, swift, and almost never explained. It's that classic because I said so dynamic. The expectations are sky high, but there's very little warmth and pretty much zero room for a child to express what they're actually feeling.
Now, on the surface, to an outsider, this might look like totally phenomenal parenting. The kids are polite, they're well-behaved, they follow the rules, but there is a massive hidden cost happening underneath. These kids grow up careful instead of confident. They disconnect on the inside because they quickly learn that their true feelings just aren't safe to share. So they develop fear instead of their own internal compass. Basically, learning their entire worth depends on just falling in line.
So moving to the exact opposite extreme, we shift from rules without warmth to warmth without any rules at all. Enter the permissive parent. Often, these parents are actually trying to make up for their own super strict childhoods. So they give abundant love, but they completely fail to provide the limits a child desperately needs. They want to be the friend parent. You know the vibe. Bedtimes are basically just mild suggestions, and a firm no will almost always turn into a yes if the kid just pushes and negotiates hard enough.
Now, you'd probably think endless freedom equals a super happy kid, right? Well, here is the plot twist. Without a strong, reliable parental container, a child actually feels a constant low-level anxiety. They really struggle with self-control and finding long-term happiness, because deep down they're terrified. They're wondering, wait, if I'm a kid and I'm the one calling all the shots here, who is actually strong enough to keep me safe?
Okay, moving on to Section 2, emotional absence to over-involvement.
These next 2 styles are a bit deceptive because they show how our own internal struggles literally alter our kids' reality. First up is the neglectful parent. Now, this is tough to talk about, but it really requires our deep compassion, definitely not our blame. A neglectful parent is physically in the room, sure, but emotionally, they're checked out. They're often just drowning in their own stress, maybe financial worries or sheer exhaustion. It leaves the child to essentially figure things out and raise themselves.
And this is truly heartbreaking. Because a kid, they can't comprehend that mom or dad is just completely overwhelmed with big adult problems. The child simply absorbs the belief that their feelings don't matter. And the silent takeaway becomes, I just wasn't worth showing up for. It leads to deep insecurities and lifelong struggles with trusting adults. They just learn they are entirely on their own.
So that brings us to a massive revelation. We've seen obvious control, and we've seen obvious absence. But what about the harm that actually hides inside a pure act of love?
Yep, I'm talking about the over-involved or helicopter parent. This parent acts out of fierce, pure devotion to protect their child from any kind of hardship. They manage every single detail, they swoop in to finish the tough science project, and they make absolutely sure their kid never, ever fails. On paper, it looks like the ultimate gold standard of attentive parenting.
But wow, there is some serious unintended damage here. By clearing away every single obstacle, they are raising kids who never learn how to actually cope with real-life struggles. The result? Crippling anxiety, an absolute paralyzing terror of failure, and this tragic, deeply hidden belief that because their parents always had to step in, they must just not be capable of handling life themselves. They look phenomenal on paper, but internally, they are incredibly fragile.
This concept perfectly captures why that over-involved style backfires so badly. Sometimes true love literally means stepping back. You have to let your child face a challenge so they can discover their own resilience. If you're always taking away the weight, the muscle never grows. You've got to let them lift it.
All right, Section 3, the gold standard, authoritarian parenting. Now, this is the style that decades of clinical research definitively prove raises the most secure kids. But hold on, be really careful here. It sounds a lot like authoritarian, but it is entirely different. The authoritative parent perfectly balances the two things a child craves most: high emotional warmth paired with clear, firm expectations. It's not control without love, and it's definitely not love without limits. It is that beautiful, slightly tricky sweet spot right in the middle.
So what does this actually look like in the wild? Well, when a rule gets broken, the authoritative parent doesn't explode, but they don't cave in either. They calmly hold the boundary, they actually explain why the rule matters, and, this is crucial, they let the child feel all their big, messy feelings. The feelings are always 100% welcome, but the boundary stands firm.
And the outcome of hitting that balance is just incredible. These kids grow up with an inner voice that is both tremendously kind and fiercely strong. They're secure because they add warmth, they're confident because they were actually allowed to struggle and figure stuff out, and they have self-discipline because the boundaries were predictable. Above all, they trust their parents because they were consistently reliable.
Which brings us to our final part. Section 4, changing your pattern every day. Listen, if you recognized yourself in any of those harder styles today, actually, scratch that. We all slip into them sometimes, so please drop the parental guilt right now. Recognizing your pattern is the exact moment that change becomes possible. You do not need some crazy overnight overhaul to become this mythical, perfect parent. Honestly, perfection doesn't exist. You just need to consciously choose a tiny shift toward warmth and structure in the very next superordinary moment. Just pause that automatic reaction. If they're struggling, step close, offer your support, but let them try. Bring the warmth, hold the boundary.
Ultimately, your kid doesn't need a perfect parent. They just need a present one who is willing to keep growing right alongside them. It all comes down to those thousands of tiny, seemingly insignificant moments that literally pour the concrete for their future foundation. So I want to leave you with this one thought to carry with you today. The very next time your child spills the milk or pushes a boundary, what kind of inner voice is your reaction going to build?